I've got 5 altcoins for you today that are set to make millionaires in 2025 specifically because they're in fantastic narratives themselves as well as being fantastic projects. But as you should all know, the projects I look for are the ones that aren't just going to be good for a quick flip between now and 2025 or in between. I'm looking for ones that, if something were to happen to you, are going to be future-proof as well, 2025 plus, and specifically some of the prices we're seeing today might not ever be hit between 2025 and onwards ever again. So Illuvium is my first pick simply because this project hits a really big gaming sector that I think will take off in the next bull market particularly, which is GameFi, right? So gaming mixed with finance where you can play the game and earn rewards, specifically the ILV or Illuvium's token. That way it's specifically looking at, tailoring towards third world countries or countries where, well, who doesn't love playing games for money, right? But essentially countries that can utilize games to get a little bit more income to break away from, an impoverished life, which I actually really, really like, okay? And we saw this with the last bull market when 𝗡cie Infinity was highly used because of this exact reason, okay? And I think Illuvium, at least the company being a AAA gaming company, I think has a lot of potential to kind of fit the #1 role for that GameFi area in the next bull market. So I think it's a very bullish narrative indeed. Now, the current price being $46.81, we actually aren't too far off where it was at the start of the year, right? At the very, very, very start of the year, I'm talking about the first of the first, which happens to be when Bitcoin was at about $16,500, a metric I always talk about because that was the lowest price Bitcoin was in the last few years. And of course, that brought the rest of the market down with it. We saw that Illuvium's price was about $38.38, meaning we aren't too far off that. We're about 20% up from that, right? So normally projects can be anywhere between 2, 3, 4x up. From that point in time, Illuvium is relatively good. And if we hit max down the side here, we can see how low we are, right? The previous bull market went up to about $1,900. The market cap was about $1.1 billion. However, the circulating supply back then was a lot less than what it is now. It was about 600,000 tokens. Right now, it's about 5.2 million. But the good thing is there is a max supply of only 10 million tokens, and they do burn. That's why the total supply right here is less than the 10 million they do burn. So for you to transfer your Illuvium tokens into the in-game currency, you have to burn the ILV token, which is really good. So there is a burn mechanism there, and I am really bullish on this project because their overworld game, which actually just recently went into beta 2.0, which means they onboarded more beta participants, is ramping up. They're adding more and more features to it. As we can see here, small things, but of course it is baby steps to the overall picture of where they want to actually take the game, right? And they do have 2 million registered beta users. So you can imagine when this is actually incorporated into a working product or at least a beta public product at the end of this year, the price will surge, okay? So overall, where do I see Illuvium going in terms of the price prediction for 2025? Well, on the minimum side of things, I think the price will go about $350, right up to a very, very maximum of about 3,200. But of course, this can definitely change. And that, of course, is considering about 7 million tokens being in circulation and the market cap bouncing anywhere between $2.5 billion right up to $22 billion. My #2 pick is Quant Network. And I know it's spoken about quite religiously, but I think it really needs to be reiterated that a price of about $100 is in golden ratio. I don't think we'll see $100 Quant moving past 2025 ever again, because the project, as we can see here, has quite a limited supply of tokens, right? So there will be a point in time, and these guys are dealing with bigger players than what, Illuvium is essentially. These guys are dealing with entire countries, CBDC specifically. So once adopted, it's just going to soar in price, and you'll never see anywhere near even $1,000 again. So that's why I'm kind of pushing it quite hard, and a lot of other, creators are as well. So what is Quant? Well, TLDR, I've made lots of videos on Quant. It's essentially connecting siloed networks, Web 2, Web 3 respective, public, private. Matter of fact, if you go and create your own private server, it can connect to that. As long as it's API connectable, Quant is pretty much like the center of anything. And right now, we'll talk about this in a second, they're working with entire countries, okay? Which would mean that they're kind of leveraging entire economies, which is important because, again, Quant can connect to anything, okay? So it can facilitate complex transfers, right, between any sort of business model, old or new. Now, Quant, again, $103 right now. We're actually down 4% from its year-to-date price of $107. So that is fantastic, right? That's what we want to look for. If we hit all, yes, 12 months ago, we were less than half of the current price. But again, I do think they will have a massive supply shock because there is so limited tokens. There won't be any more. There's no inflation. So again, this is, in my opinion, a fantastic opportunity. But I want to reiterate a bit more. They currently have been they have been working with the Bank of England. Now, the Bank of England is then working with the BIS, or Bank of International Settlements, which is kind of like a central bank to central banks. It currently is connecting 65 central banks together to facilitate all different types of things. And essentially, the BIS created Project Roslyn, which is looking to develop an API interface that can connect retail CBDCs, which is what the private sector uses, which is what we use in the economy, right, to a central bank ledger, right? So how do you do that? Well, you have to have an API interface that can connect to anything, old or new, which essentially is what Quant is. As we can see here, this kind of hints at what Quant is, right? There's no real competitor to what Quant's doing in the current markets, Web 2 or Web 3, at least as effective. So this is like, if you read this paragraph, it pretty much is signaling Quant. And we can kind of go one step further and go to one of Quant's recent tweets where they actually said that there was a private panel between these two guys. One of these guys over here is 𝗡cie𝗿𝗱𝗩𝗣𝗡, the CEO and founder of Quant. He was on a private panel with the guy spearheading the CBDC implementation for the Bank of England, right? Tom Mutton. So the transcripts for this haven't been released yet because it is a private panel, and it will be coming out soon, apparently, from Quant themselves. But this pretty much ties with the Project Roslyn news. So for me, there's going to be some good news coming out very, very soon. Now, I don't think the Bank of England CBDC is coming out anytime soon, probably late of this decade. But essentially, when that happens, and the BIS might decide to implement the Overledger into more than just the UK sort of system, Quant's just going to blow up in price. And obviously, they do have some really important partners already confirmed, like LackChain, Oracle, 𝗡cie, and UST. And they're also a white label service, which means we don't know the full extent of who's using the Quant network, right? We only know when the price goes up. So with that said, guys, I have high hopes for Quant. On a minimum side of things, I think I'm going to estimate $2,000 price in 2025, and to a $10,000 price. So anywhere in between, I think $10,000 price is on the high side. The market cap would have to be about $150 billion. So that would obviously have to come on the back of some important news like a CBDC implementation. My number 3 pick is Casper Network. And why? Well, these guys are hyper-focused on enterprise adoption, right? You can compare this with other networks in the Web3 space, Hedera Hashgraph, for example, even Cardano, Quant Network, that have their paws very much so in the enterprise level. But these guys are solely focused on onboarding existing businesses to leverage blockchain technology. A more suitable comparison would be looking at Corda, Quorum, or Hyperledger Fabric, except Casper has their utility token in the public, crypto atmosphere market, if you will, right? So they're focusing again on builders. They have WebAssembly state machine based in code environment and also Rust. They're upgradable smart contracts, which is very important, right? And it's actually, you never see that in crypto. It's very important. It's also very decentralized. They are sharding their network as well.
This is serious. I just sharded.
Which meaning it's going to be very, very scalable. They're focusing on these macro sort of trends, if you will, or narratives, right? Tokenization, ownership rights. This is actually going to be quite important in the future. So that no one can obviously copy your work. Also financial standards as well. So algorithmic financial standards, and also focusing on the creator economy, right? So musicians, artists, things like that, okay? Which is actually an underrated narrative, in my opinion. So Casper right now is about 5 cents rather, okay? So when we're talking about the year-to-date price, we're actually only about 80% up. So not even a 2x up from where it was at its market's all-time low if you were in the last few years. I'm not going to talk about the previous price action because this was very much skewed for Casper. So most of you guys will know about the reasons why, and if you don't, well, that's for a whole different sort of video, okay? Now, circulating supply is about 11 billion tokens. Now, we're going to see a little bit more dilution before 2025, but I'm going to estimate around about 2 billion tokens because there is an 8% year-on-year inflation rate. Again, if you don't know the reasons why that's okay, then you do need to do a little bit more research into economics, specifically token economics, because again, Casper is onboarding massive players here. So that 8% inflation will definitely be eaten up by the billions of transactions. Again, this is more of a longer term play, 2025 plus for sure. Now they are lacking a bit on their existing ecosystem, I must admit, but it is good to see that on their recent tweets, they are focused on onboarding more Web3 based applications to bolster the ecosystem. So where do I think Casper's price will go in the future? Well, a minimum of 4x from the current price. We're not going to focus on previous action, remember, because it is very, very skewed, which means I believe it'll go to around about 1.8 cents rather, right up to about a $23 billion market cap, meaning the price will be about $1.88. Okay, now I definitely think it can do more than that, but we really haven't seen too much of Casper in the previous market. And again, the narrative they're hyper focused on, we will really see take off 2025 plus. My number 4 pick is Hedera. Of course, you guys know how much I love HBAR, and it is spoken about quite often because these guys are really going to make some moves in 2025 and beyond. As we'll see in a second, they have some massive connections. They have some really good roadmap events coming up. And ultimately, they benefit from first mover advantage. The founder and creators of Hedera Hashgraph, which was initially called, they created the Hashgraph, right? Which is a unique type of DLT, different to a blockchain, more similar to a DAG, that is, benefits from a whole heap of things, faster TPS, more security, things like that, okay? So I'm very bullish on Hedera. They have their paws in multiple different markets, enterprise and also crypto specific, okay? So let's talk more about the price before we move on. Now, the current price is 5.2 cents. The low at the start of the year was about 3.6 cents, so we're about a 44% up from there, which is, again, a very good time to buy. And if we zoom out, we pretty much are almost on par with what it was back in 2020. And remember, the very, very all-time low for HBAR was actually 1 cent. So even at that case, we're only a 5x up. So this is literally another opportunity for us to get in cheap. Now, there is a max and fixed supply, just like Illuvium and Quant, at 50 billion tokens, which is what I love. Now, this year, we saw the onboarding of 2 more governing council members, Cofra and the more well-known Dell Technologies. Ultimately, this is much better than having a traditional governing sort of system like we see in crypto, where whoever holds the most amount of tokens gets more voting power, and ultimately, essentially, the direction of the project is in the hands of teenagers. So I much more prefer this, and ultimately it gives Hedera the step above the competition because they have now formed connections with these people. As of like the last week, the latest HBAR sort of governing council meeting was actually held with Google. So I mean, what does that tell you, right? There's obviously connections being made here. Also, the roadmap is quite bullish. In Q2 of this year, we're going to see the onboarding of community-run nodes. Thus far, it's only been governing council nodes active on the network. And then in Q3, we'll see this optimized towards the very, very end of the year. Plus, Lehman Bard, one of the main founder and creator of the Hashgraph itself, he mentioned they're going to bring sharding in, which will pretty much mean infinite scalability, right? So lots happening. Now, I do want to say thank you to the community. You guys mentioned that there is going to be a cliff happening very, very soon, which means we're going to have about 2.5% of this supply unlocked. All I would like to say is I don't know where this come from. I don't trust third-party websites as much as I do from the horse's mouth, and Hedera hasn't actually mentioned this is happening. So, I mean, I don't doubt it, but definitely if you guys can let me know below on an article or link me to wherever Hedera has specifically said they are unlocking these tokens. Now, where I see the price going in the future? Well, I'm quite bullish on HBAR, and a lot of metrics are supporting that fact. I see it minimum going to about a 25 bill market cap to a maximum of 200 billion market cap, which means the price will be anywhere between 6.9 cents and $5.50. Respecting, we're going to see about 36 billion tokens in circulation. So yes, very, very bullish for HBAR. And last but definitely not least, we have Chainlink. Now, I don't know why, but people seem to sleep on Chainlink, and they're going to have their minds blown moving forward because these guys are kind of like interoperating with so many Web 2 companies, and also they're so deeply embedded within Web 3. You won't ever see Chainlink extracted from the market. They really, really benefit from something called embedding. And ultimately, they're only going to get better. They have a really important upgrade coming out this year called 𝗡cie, and we'll touch briefly on that in just a second, right? But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because it's a high market cap. Maybe it's been around for forever, or maybe, ignorance is bliss. I don't know why, but people need to have their eyes on this project. And specifically, get this, the price is at $6.50, right? We're only 18% up from its lows at the start of the year. Matter of fact, if we go back to pretty much the last year, we've been trading sideways around this price range, which means there's a very strong level of support here. And, what does that say? let's buy. Well, not financial advice, of course, at least I am, okay? Now, the really good thing about Chainlink is, again, just like Hedera, just like Quant, just like Illuvium, there is a fixed max supply of 1 billion tokens. As a matter of fact, they've only emitted 10% of their total supply over the last 2 years. And their new sort of step, the new evolution in Chainlink called, again, 𝗡cie/IP or Cross-Chain Interoperability Protocol, is going to be allowing smart contracts to talk with one another without going through all the extra steps they normally would connecting to different networks. They can do it all through Chainlink directly, which is super important, right? They kind of compared the 𝗡cie/IP protocol to TCP/IP and what it did for the internet. So you can pretty much build also applications upon it. So there is so much more token demand still to come for Chainlink, and this is coming out this year. So it's been years in the works, and I just can't wait to see what happens to the price of Chainlink, especially, you know, when we look at the long term, 2025 plus. And if you're still sitting there going, oh, it's an old project, and you're still kind of humming and hawing, well, 1,700 projects currently rely on Chainlink. Rely on it. They can't live without it. You really can't extract this thing from the market, and that's without 𝗡cie/IP, right? So if you have a look at the topology of the network, as you can see, you know, 𝗡cie/IP rather, is over on the right-hand side here, but this pretty much goes to show you just like how deep-rooted they really are in every single aspect of Web3. And remember, Web2 as well. They actually have, you know, ties with some of the biggest names in the space. And if I can find over here, we've got Swift, Google Cloud, AWS. They actually also have their paws in the WEF, which I don't want to talk too much about, right? But as we can see here, if you're still sitting there going, no, right? They have processed $6.9 trillion worth of value up until last year, 2022, and they have 5.8 billion data points from the real world into crypto on chain. So, you know, Chainlink is one of the OGs, but it is one that will continue to grow. And with that said, I think the price of Chainlink in 2025 at a minimum will go to $70 and a maximum to $350, with respects to seeing an increase in 10% more of the supply over the next 2 years, just like we saw with the last 2 years, putting the circulating supply to about 62% or about 620 million tokens. So these aren't just my picks for 2025 based on promising narratives and of course important events mixed with obviously the promising projects themselves, but also if something were to happen to me and these projects were left to my family and they didn't know how to get the money out till, let's just say, 2030, I want them to know that they're going to have lots of money available when they do eventually find my wallets, right? This is the kind of mental space that I like to put myself in so that I'm finding the best possible projects, okay? Not just for the short term, but for the long term. All right, guys, hopefully you have enjoyed. Let me know what you think down below. And also, if you want to support the channel, go use some of the links, sign up to some of the websites I have down below, specifically NordVPN. I would really appreciate it. It helps the channel out a lot. All right, guys, talk to you in the next one.